Victoria Sterling had not wanted to go on a blind date, but her assistant had been so persistent that Victoria finally agreed just to end the conversation. At 31, Victoria commanded Sterling Technologies with the same determination that had carried her through 2 years of physical rehabilitation after the car accident that left her using a wheelchair. The spinal injury had changed many things about her life, but her sharp business mind and strategic thinking remained as formidable as ever. What the accident had changed was her willingness to trust that people could see past her disability to the person she remained. Victoria had become increasingly isolated, partly from the practical challenges of accessibility, but mostly from the painful discovery that many people now saw her wheelchair before they saw her. The blind date had been arranged by her well-meaning assistant, Rebecca, who insisted that Victoria needed to start socializing again. The reservation was at Meridian, an upscale restaurant downtown, and Victoria was to meet James Morrison, a lawyer who supposedly shared her interest in art and classical music. Victoria arrived precisely on time, having called ahead to ensure the restaurant could accommodate her wheelchair. She positioned herself at the reserved table and waited, checking her phone periodically while observing the elegant dining room around her. 20 minutes past the scheduled time, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message from her date. "Sorry, something came up. Rain check?" Victoria stared at the message, feeling a familiar combination of humiliation and resignation. She had suspected this might happen when James saw her wheelchair, but hoping otherwise had made the disappointment sharper. As she prepared to leave, the waiter approached with obvious concern. "Ma'am, will your companion be joining you this evening?" Victoria managed a professional smile. "Change of plans," she said simply. "Could I please have the check for my water?" Before the waiter could respond, a man approached their table with hesitant politeness. "Excuse me," he said, but I could not help overhearing. "Are you Victoria Sterling?" Victoria looked up to see a man in his early 30s with dark hair and kind eyes, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that suggested casual dinner plans rather than formal dining. He appeared genuinely concerned rather than intrusive. "I am David Chen," he continued. "When I heard your name, I realized you might be the woman my sister Emma was trying to set me up with. She gave me a description and mentioned you would be here tonight." Victoria felt confusion replace embarrassment. Your sister David's expression grew apologetic. "Emma, Chen, she works in your marketing department. She has been insisting for weeks that I meet her brilliant boss, but I kept declining because I assumed you would not be interested in dating a mechanic." Understanding dawned on Victoria as she realized what had happened. Rebecca had arranged one date while Emma had been trying to arrange another, and both men had apparently arrived at the same restaurant. "So you are not James Morrison," Victoria said. "And you were not expecting a mechanic?" David replied with a self-deprecating smile. "I can understand if this is not what you had in mind for your evening." Victoria found herself studying David's face, noting the genuine warmth in his expression and the complete absence of the pity or discomfort she had learned to expect when people first noticed her wheelchair. "Actually," she said with the first genuine smile she had felt in weeks, "this is the most interesting thing that has happened to me in months. Would you like to join me for dinner?" David's relief was obvious. "I would be honored. Though I should warn you that I know nothing about fancy restaurants. I was planning to suggest the pizza place down the street." Victoria laughed, a sound that surprised her with its spontaneity. "That sounds perfect. Let me just cancel this reservation over pizza and casual conversation." Victoria discovered that David was nothing like the men she usually encountered in her business circles. He owned a small auto repair shop that specialized in classic cars, had put himself through technical school, and spoke about his work with genuine passion rather than financial ambition. More importantly, David treated her wheelchair as simply another aspect of who she was, like having blonde hair or wearing a particular outfit. He asked thoughtful questions about her business, shared stories about interesting restoration projects, and somehow made Victoria feel like the most fascinating person in the room. When David mentioned that he had modified his shop to be fully accessible because one of his regular customers used a wheelchair, Victoria realized she was talking to someone who understood inclusion as a practical matter rather than a theoretical concept. The evening stretched well beyond dinner as they discovered shared interests in classic films, travel stories, and a surprisingly similar sense of humor. When David finally walked Victoria to her car, she found herself reluctant to end their time together. "I hope this does not sound presumptuous," David said, as Victoria transferred from her wheelchair to her driver's seat. "But would you like to have dinner again tomorrow night? Somewhere I can actually afford to pay the bill." Victoria looked at this man who had somehow managed to make her forget every reason she had convinced herself that dating was impossible. "You know what?" she said. "Why do not you cook for me? I will bring dessert and wine." David's smile transformed his entire face. "I think Emma is going to be insufferably proud of her matchmaking skills." The relationship that developed over the following months surprised Victoria with its natural progression. David proved to be thoughtful, intelligent, and refreshingly direct about both his limitations and his strengths. His blue-collar background provided perspectives that challenged Victoria's assumptions, while her business experience offered insights that helped David expand his shop. Most importantly, David never treated Victoria's disability as something to overcome or ignore, but simply as one part of the remarkable woman he was falling in love with. He adapted naturally to accessibility considerations while never making Victoria feel like a burden or special project. When Victoria finally told David about the failed blind date that had led to their meeting, he laughed with genuine amusement. So James Morrison's rudeness was actually the best thing that could have happened, David said as they sat together on Victoria's accessible rooftop garden. Watching the city lights below, Victoria leaned against David's shoulder, marveling at how comfortable physical affection had become with someone who saw her as desirable, rather than fragile. That man's loss was definitely our gain. They married 18 months later in a ceremony that celebrated their unconventional love story and their commitment to building an inclusive life together. Victoria's business success allowed David to expand his shop into a training center for mechanics interested in accessibility modifications, while David's grounded perspective helped Victoria remember that the most valuable achievements were often the most personal ones. At their reception, Emma gave a speech about her successful matchmaking, while Rebecca admitted that her planned setup had been a disaster that led to something better than anyone could have arranged years later. When Victoria spoke at conferences about disability and business leadership, she would often mention that some of life's most beautiful connections happen when our original plans fall apart and force us to be open to possibilities we never considered. Sometimes the most healing relationships begin not with perfect matches or ideal circumstances, but with the courage to remain open to unexpected kindness from people who see our worth exactly as we are. If this story touched your heart, please